Gallagher.
Here.
Delegate Gasson.
Here.
Delegate Green.
Here.
Delegate Harder.
Here.
Delegate Killian.
Here.
Delegate King. Delegate McKelvey.
Here.
Delegate O'Malley. Dean Omen.
Here.
Delegate Sampson.
Yeah.
Delegate Ty.
Here.
Speaker Warner.
Here.
Madam Speaker, that is 14 delegates representing 97.12% of the county's population.
Quorum for the assembly for this meeting. Next, approval of journals and minutes. The clerks have distributed draft of the journal and minutes for the assembly meeting of July 1st, 2026 to the members prior to this meeting. Are there any corrections? There being none, unless there are any objections, the journal and minutes will be approved as submitted. Next on the business calendar is Committee of the Whole. If there is no objection, the Assembly will enter into the Committee of the Whole to consider communications in items 8 and 9. Objections, okay. Since there's no objection, the Assembly has entered into the Committee of Whole. Next on the calendar is communication from members of the public and officials. Now we have a public comment. Someone online who would be okay. Howard. Go ahead, Howard Gostin online.
My name is Howard Gostin and I'm from Eastham. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Orleans Historical Society. In addition, I'm a docent, historian, and crew member of the Coast Guard 36-500. I speak today in support of the resolution endorsing the Ocean Rescue Museum of Cape Cod. Those of us who volunteered and worked on this national treasure for years are sadly aware that an 80-year-old wooden boat cannot stay in the water forever. But we're excited that the boat will end up in a museum worthy of preserving its history and telling the story of its crew and their valor. An endorsement from the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates will be a big help as we navigate the waters of fundraising for the museum, from our donors, and for grants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Go ahead, Liz Adams.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Liz Adams, and I am from Eastham, and I'm the Capital Campaign Director for the Orleans Historical Society. And like Howard, I am excited of the impact that having a resolution to support our Ocean Rescue Museum of Cape Cod project would have on our ability to execute such an important project. So Howard shared with you about the importance of the boat, and I want to share with you a little bit about the Ocean Rescue Museum of Cape Cod itself. So while the CG-36-500, known as the vessel that completed the greatest small boat rescue in Coast Guard history, would be the focal point of that museum, we also are looking to have expanded exhibits that go as far back as the Sparrowhawk Rescue in 1626 and celebrate some of our Native American heritage, because it was actually the Nauset tribe that performed that rescue on that day, and also highlight all of the Coast Guard life-saving efforts across the Cape and actually across the United States with rotating exhibits. So we are really focused on what this museum could mean for the town of Orleans, as well as all of the Cape and Barnstable County in terms of tourism and making it a landmark when it comes to ocean rescue heritage and history. Thank you very much for considering our proposal.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? No. Okay, next on the business calendar is communications from the regional commissioners, administrator, and directors. Regional Administrator Michael Dutton is here on behalf of the executive branch to give a report on the most recent Board of Regional Commissioners meeting. Administrator
Thank
Dunn.
you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to the delegates for coming out on a beautiful summer day. I do want to just report on the meeting held, the commissioners' meeting held in Harwich, town of Harwich, on last Thursday, usually on Wednesday, but Harwich had scheduling conflict, so we met on Thursday morning. It was a lengthy meeting. The commissioners engaged the Harwich Select Board and the Harwich Town Manager in a discussion about a number of different items. Of particular note was the Harwich Board's concern about sort of carrying capacity of additional housing on the Cape and more specifically in Harwich, specifically water capacity, focusing on the Monomoy lens. We also got accolades, I will say, from the town on our Aquafund program, which has funded up, I believe, we're up to almost $100 million worth of funding for Cape residents to either tie into sewer systems or upgrade their Title V systems. So that's proven to be a very popular item. One of the items on the agenda did not get aired, just for the purposes of time, and that was the 2026 final local aid report. I think I've shared that with the Assembly draft version, but I'm happy to send the final version to the Assembly. It essentially points out that the Cape in aggregate sends an amount of money to the state through lottery sales, lottery ticket sales, and we get back a little over 5 cents on the dollar in unrestricted local aid, unrestricted government aid. So there's quite a differential between what we send up and what we get back. Keep in mind, lottery is the lottery. The lottery pays out prizes. People don't play the lottery so that the state can give it all out in local aid. It'd be nice if they did. But according, and I'll just divert 1 second, legislation says that the lottery program, which was started in the 1970s, can distribute up to 70% of its revenue as prize money. It can allocate up to 15% of its revenue for overhead, and then other residual things, and the balance goes to communities. The lottery has been quite successful in Massachusetts, if that's the term you want to use, and it distributes somewhere. It has to distribute at least 40% of its revenues in local aid. I'm confusing everybody now, including myself. Has to distribute 40% of its revenues as prize money. It does distribute 70% of its revenue as prize money. So it's a very popular lottery because there are more winners than might otherwise be. So it's a popular lottery. Regardless of all these figures, the important thing to remember is that it's roughly 22% of the revenues that it brings in can be distributed back to the towns. So in aggregate, the Cape, if all things were being equal, the Cape should be getting back 22% of what the residents pay in to the lottery system. In reality, we get about 5.2% back. So that's quite a differential. So in any case, we're not going to change the world when it comes to lottery, but we do think it's important that this body know and the towns know that their unrestricted government aid, they need to know what's behind that figure and why that figure is what it is. So in any case, I'm happy to share the final report. We made a few tweaks to the draft, but I'll share the final report with the Assembly. Happy to do that. Anyway, back to the meeting. We had a lengthy update on food insecurity on the Cape, which is a significant issue. Andrea Scarpolini really sort of led that discussion. All of the pertinent Cape pantries, food pantries were invited. I think just about all of them were there. And we had a really good discussion that culminated with the idea that the county should sponsor essentially a food access summit sometime this fall. So we're working internally on developing sort of goals for that summit, topics for that summit and a broader invite list to make sure that we capture all the pertinent food agencies that really should be involved. Ultimately, I think our goal is to get to the point where we've got a regional approach, that we're certainly not trying to take anything away from the individual towns or the individual nonprofits that run effective programs, but we want to make sure we put everybody in a position where the county can go to the federal government or go to the state government looking for appropriate funding for adequate food supplies for those that couldn't otherwise afford food. So that was a very healthy and good conversation. The director of the Cape Cod Commission, Christy Sanatori, talked a little bit about the progress, actually now finalized Harwich Hazard Mitigation Plan update, and that has been completed, and Town of Harwich has that, and so that was a good update there. Otherwise, their consent agenda were a number of agreements, grant agreements, and so forth. And that is really about the gist of it. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yes, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we're not getting a full presentation, which I don't think we need, could we though get the slides that were presented for the food insecurity? Thank you.
I would happily provide those. Absolutely. Yep.
Deputy Speaker Freisel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, but going back to the lottery, first of all, who makes the decisions on how to allocate that money? I mean, it's not being done on a just strict, you pay in and you get back 22%. So obviously, if we're getting 5, somebody else is getting a lot more than 22. So who's making those decisions, and on what basis do they make those decisions?
The short answer is that those distributions, that formula was created in 1974 based on population and equalized valuations. So as you probably could guess, things have changed significantly since 1974. I will say that that a decision was made by the state in the early 90s, 90, 91, 92 timeframe to sort of freeze the formula that they had at that point. And so we basically have been getting some percentage that's based on the freeze and proportional allocation based in 1992, I think it was.
So there must be other communities who are similarly affected as we are. Do we know that there are others who are also in the process of complaining about this frozen formula?
So our state senator, Dylan Fernandez, one of our state senators, has dug into this. He proposed an amendment to the budget, which did not make it in, but his amendment was proposing a study commission to look at specifically at lottery money allocation and how government aid is distributed to the towns. As I say, that didn't make it into the budget. I can tell you that Dukes County, until we gave them a copy of our report and some of the numbers that we had generated, hadn't been on their radar. It's now on their radar. They're collectively about 3-point-something% of their lottery revenues come back to them. So they're less than, we are obviously Nantucket, as you could probably guess, is substantially lower than that. So the challenge is that we are viewed as a wealthy community, which is, we just finished talking about food insecurity. We're not necessarily a wealthy community of year-round people. So equalized valuation, while it might work in other parts of the state, doesn't really work to calculate that formula here on the Cape. So our effort will be to continue to encourage the legislature to at least begin studying the issue. But again, our challenge is that the communities, Boston being one, Boston gets about 44%, about double what it should be. Cambridge is even higher than that. And so the Cambridge, and specifically we all think is sort of a wealthy community, actually gets a very significantly higher percentage of their locally generated revenues coming back to them. So when you look at the whole list and you do the calculation, it's a complete hodgepodge of figures, and honestly makes almost no sense. So I think that was the impetus for Senator Fernandez to really encourage his peers to look into it, but unfortunately didn't make it this year.
Dean Owen.
And this is going to be very controversial, but I understand that the lottery system is voluntary. So if we had the political know-how to get the 3 counties to stop the lottery for a period of time and not participate at all, perhaps that could create some pressure on the other politicians in Boston, Cambridge, and such to probably look at it a little differently. I'm not saying we should, but it's an idea.
Anyone else like to ask some questions? Oh,
Thank you,
Delegate
Madam
Gilman.
Speaker. I'm just glad I was sitting down when you said that the formula they use doesn't make any sense, because I never would have believed that in a million years. And to Delegate Oman's comment, just remember during COVID, when you couldn't buy a pair of shoes, you could buy a lottery ticket. So I don't think we're going to get any traction there. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Speaker.
So I'm assuming no to my question, but I'll ask anyway. Is there any way Mass Municipal Association might be interested in this, or they just don't want to get into this fight at all, just stay neutral and out of it?
Seeing as Mass Municipal represents all the municipalities, chances are that they probably, I have had a discussion with the head of Mass Municipal about this, and that's probably not something that they recognize, that there are inequities, but that's probably not something that they're going to lobby hard for, because I mean, it's easy to look at the representation in the legislature. I mean, you've got a bunch of people from Boston, a bunch of people from the surrounding suburbs, including Cambridge. So it's really arguably fighting an uphill battle. But I think, from my perspective, I think it's important that the towns really understand how the Cape gets shortchanged, and the islands as well, but they do get shortchanged. So that's sort of the objective. And this is something that we'll likely do every year. We'll update it every year or every 2 years. If there's some significant movement within the legislature to actually start a study commission, then we've got reports and data that we can feed them, certainly.
Are there any other questions for Administrator Dutton?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the update. And let's see. Oh, yes, Next Finance Director Carol Coppola is here. Did I say the right name? Yes. With representatives from our auditors to present the fiscal year 2025 independent audit report.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. Renee Davis with CBiz CPAs. With me this afternoon is Romina Mamelli, the director on the audit. I am going to attempt to, well, let me share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I want to make sure. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. What I'm going to do is go through the results of the 2025 audit. I am, welcome any questions you have or any details that you need. We did present this similar presentation to the county commissioners. Happy to be in front of the Assembly of Delegates as well. And our goal here is to sort of explain the audit, what an audit does, what the audit does not do, and to give you some of the highlights of the results of the audit and the financial position. Again, an audit is always, hindsight. We're always auditing something that happened in the past. You're sort of operating today and planning for next year's budget. This is the results of the 2025 audit. So it's an audit that the year that ended over a year ago. But it does give, let's see if I can get through this. What the audit does after the fact, after, you just ended 2026, once Carol's done her job and the books and records are all verified at the county level, and you're happy that your internal controls are working, that your financial numbers are okay, then the auditors can come in and start doing their work. What we do is we test the numbers that are in your financial statement. So in your ledgers, you're recording activity, you're approving a budget, they're living and operating within that budget. We come in to verify that the financial information that's in the ledgers is presented fairly in all material respects. And when I say in all material respects, the audit does not look at every transaction. We look at your internal controls to make sure that the county has a process to present accurate financial information during the year while it's happening, and that you're not sort of waiting for months after year end to get accurate financial numbers. We look at your internal controls. We do what we call walkthroughs. We're looking to make sure that what you've voted for a budget is actually how things are operating, that things are being recorded timely and accurately to the correct account so that the information that you are receiving throughout the year is accurate. And to make sure that you have controls to reconcile so that the cash in the banks, the investments are properly stated, that they actually exist, that they're valued properly, that the debt is recorded properly, and some other big long-term assets and liabilities that we'll talk about. Making sure that you have that you're following your policies. You have quite a few financial policies in place. Having the policies is one thing, following them is another. So we review your policies, make sure that you have all the required policies and you're following best practices, and you have systems of control in place to make sure that those are followed and adequate. And really an independent audit is meant to build trust. We are independent of the county. We don't work there. We're not in your ledgers. I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? Okay. So independence means that we cannot we can't tell you what to do. We're here to evaluate you from the outside. So keeping our independence is very, very important for us to make sure that there is transparency, that we're not acting as governance, and we have no reason to do things other than to make sure that your numbers and your controls are accurate and well reported. The audit of your financial statements covers two different areas. It covers the financial statements themselves, all of your funds and groups within the county government, as well as what's called the single audit, and that's your federal award. So there's a higher level of scrutiny, if you will, on the federal awards. So two different reports get issued. One is your financial statements that are in the form of your ACFR, your annual comprehensive financial report. That is the big 125-page report that gets issued. You do get an award from the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, related to that report. Within that ACFR is your actual financial statements and our opinions that we give on your financial statements. Above and beyond that, the single audit, the report on federal awards, includes all of your federal expenditures, and we have to do an assessment, a risk assessment of those federal expenditures, and we select each year certain grants that we call major grants or major programs, and we do a compliance audit on those. So For fiscal year 2025, of course, it was ARPA. ARPA has been sort of the name of the game, the big federal award that you've had that has required more specific detailed testing. And there's been no issues related to that. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So two different audits. The results of the audit for your financial statements are unmodified. So when we're done with the audit, we issue an opinion on your financial statements as well as on the CFA. An unmodified opinion is what we call a clean opinion. There were no modifications based on the audit. There were no internal control deficiencies that were noted, no material weaknesses, no compliance issues, so no non-compliance that would affect your financial statements. And the clean opinion, has gone on for a while, that you've had multiple years of having clean audit opinions with no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls that were noted. For federal awards, you were compliant. There were internal controls in place. As you're aware, ARPA, we're getting towards the end of it. Finally, it seems like it's been around for a while. This was a COVID-related, lot of money that came through the county. The county had to put in strong systems of controls to make sure you manage the funds, that you are following the final rule that the federal government put out, which has changed in a couple of instances, and that you're spending it properly. We're finally towards the end. All money will be out the door by the end of December 2026. So really getting towards the end of it. And in total, your federal expenditures, you'll see, were $23 million, and $18.5 million of that was for ARPA funds. So the rest of it sort of is dwarfed by the ARPA money that was spent in 2025. Our opinions on that report, unmodified. So based on all of the detailed testing that we had to do, based on the federal requirements in the compliance supplement, there were no findings, zero question costs, and you issue your reports in time by March 31st, that you have a clean history and clean audit opinion, and you're considered what we call a low-risk auditee because you have a clean track record. And the single audit, what it gets into with the federal awards is allowable costs. So making sure that you are spending federal dollars in accordance with what they allow you to spend. ARPA is restrictive on what you could spend the money on, how you could spend that money. And we're testing specific transactions, not 100% of the transactions, but a sample of transactions to make sure your controls are working and that you're following the federal guidelines. Cash management and reporting, very important with ARPA, to make sure that you are reporting to the federal government timely and that those reports actually do tie back to your books and records and they're clean. Eligibility, procurement, federal procurement laws are sometimes different than state procurement laws. We need to make sure that you are following the correct federal and state procurement laws relating to that. That you are monitoring your subrecipients. We all know with ARPA, there's a lot of money that goes out to subrecipients, and you are required to do ongoing monitoring to make sure they are spending the federal funds accordingly. And the big thing with ARPA, of course, period of performance, making sure that all of your funds were obligated in time. So obligations were due last year, and then money out the door. The final grant will close out this year. So again, those are the things that we're testing related to the federal grant, and there were no findings related to that. And some of what the audit covers related to your financial statements, cash and investments. The county had over $80 million in cash and investments. Of course, that's always a significant audit area. We want to make sure that that's properly reported, stated. To do that, really, the best way for us to do it is to get an independent confirmation, right? So we're going to an outside source to make sure that the money's really there. The money that's on your ledger ties back to actual funds that are in the bank, that you're reporting accurately in your financial statements, and that your disclosures are all in accordance with auditing standards. Stabilization funds, you had over $33 million in stabilization funds, making sure we're tying those back into the votes, approving them, they're properly reported. You have over $5 million in your OPEB trust to help offset your OPEB liability. That's your other post-employment benefits, the liability to cover health insurance for retirees. You're starting to fund that. We want to make sure that you have the trust properly set up and that those assets are properly invested and recorded properly. And then there's over 100 other individual funds and accounts at the county that we consider and include in our testing. So again, we're not testing everything, but we are considering everything when we're pulling our selections and testing the different cycles. So receivables, payroll, accounts payable, those things. We're pulling from a sample of all transactions. And the reserve levels we're looking at to make sure that you have adequate. We don't set the policies. We don't tell you what you should have for reserves, but we certainly are looking to make sure that you have adequate reserves to provide you with flexibility. So having your $33.4 million in stabilization funds gives you financial flexibility. We all know that, things can happen quickly, and, we want to make sure that you're able to provide the services that the county has committed to provide within what you have now for resources and what you're going to be getting in for resources, and that you're in a good position to fund your long-term liabilities, pension as part of Barnstable County retirement system, as well as OPEB, paying down your debt and continuing to run the county. And with that, I'll get into a few highlights. Of course, the budget and the general fund, you had $38.3 million in your general fund budget for 25. You budgeted to use $15 million of your reserves. A lot of that was going to build new stabilization funds. So 13.9 was for the revenue contingency stabilization fund, $1 million for county operations, and then $700,000 for the PFAS contamination liability. Revenues came in, you budget conservatively, revenues exceeded your budget by $6 million, so conservative budgeting there. Your expenditures and encumbrances were under budget by over $2 million, meaning that you didn't overspend your budget. That excess that you didn't spend goes back into your available funds to be used for future purposes. And your net decrease was $7.2 million. So on a budgetary basis, your general fund went down, but your general fund went down because you put a bunch of money into your savings account, right? You budgeted to put $15 million into your savings account. So overall, you budgeted for, I'm going to say, sort of a loss, and you did very well compared to that because revenues came in over budget and you didn't spend all of your appropriations. For your general fund balance, if you're looking at your balance sheet on a fund basis, you had $44.5 million in your general fund. That includes your stabilization funds. If you're looking at the financial statements, I just gave you a page reference of 29. Your general fund balance is 192% of general fund expenditures. That seems really, really high, but the reason that's high is because of the significant amount that you put in the stabilization funds. The money that's assigned but not available, small amount, $181,000 for next year's encumbrances that were just reserved at year end, leaving you with unassigned of $44 million. And again, we talked about the new money that you've put into your stabilization funds. You've got a bunch of different stabilization funds set up now. So general, capital, emergency, PFAS, revenue, and then the special legislation stabilization fund. And I've listed the amounts here, but significant amount that you've reserved for future in those stabilization funds. Other governmental funds, of course, the Cape Cod Commission, ending balance of $10 million in that fund. Your septic loan program had loans receivable of over $17 million. And your ARPA grant, what's left in that at the end of the year is $3.2 million. And your balance, essentially that balance is investment earnings that you've made on the ARPA money. Unearned revenue is 4.9. With these grants, you don't recognize the revenue. So unearned is almost like recorded as sort of a liability. You don't recognize the revenue until you've actually given the money out. So the 4.9 million at the end of 25 were funds that you had not given out yet at that point. Grants and gifts, you had an ending balance of $356,000. And that's really timing between getting money in and spending it on those programs. And other non-major funds of 8.8 million. 8.8 million, because you do an ACFR or a more intensive financial report, you can see what makes that up. That's other special revenue funds, revolving funds and so forth. And there's a lot of detail on what makes that up in your financial statements because you're giving the readers more information through the ACFR. Other than your governmental funds, you have a dredge enterprise fund. The enterprise fund runs like a separate business. It's operated and reported just like it would be a separate full accrual business, like a private business. Your ending balance is $435,000. That is net of the liability. So the reason it looks so low is because you do have the pension liability of 1.5 million and 809,000 in your OPEB liability reported within dredge. So that's their share of that liability. OPEB in total, you've pre-funded $500,000 in fiscal year 25. There's a gross up, that's just revenues and expenditures. And the liability reported in your financial statements is based on a valuation, actuarial valuation dated June of 2024. Your trust fund, the money you've set aside to pre-fund your liability, is 5 million, and your net unfunded liability is 19.8 million. What that means really is the actuary goes through every 2 years and gets a list of who you have for people that are getting health insurance now, retirees that are getting health insurance, and who you have on staff, your current active employees, and what you're obligated to pay them when they retire. They make a lot of assumptions on how much you're going to have to fund that, what health insurance is going to cost, how long people are going to live, how many people are going to take the health insurance. They get all that information. They come up with an estimate, an actuarial estimate of what the liability is going to be. The reason we do it every 2 years is that it can change. Facts and circumstances and trends can change. So they want to reevaluate it every 2 years. So 19.8 million is an unfunded liability at the end of 25. And this is not like the pension system. There's not a legal requirement for you to be funding that at this point, but it is financially prudent. The rating agencies certainly look at it. It's a real liability that you're going to have to pay in the future. So it's certainly recommended that you continue to fund and bring down that liability. The discount rate, one of the assumptions that used was 6.25%. And there's a lot of information in your financial statements with 10 years worth of trend information to show how that liability is going over time, because it's such a significant liability and a big part of the county's future. On the other hand, the pension liability, a little bit less under your control. You're part of the County Retirement Association's net pension liability. This is different in fact that it does have to be funded, right? So state law in Massachusetts requires you to be on a funding schedule. Barnstable County is on a funding schedule to be totally funded. So you're paying into them your share of their liability. They do the same thing as the OPEB. They hire an actuary. They come in every 2 years and reassess the liability, and you're getting a share of that based on your covered payroll. So for testing that, to make sure we're comfortable with that, we're making sure the information that you send to Barnstable County is accurate. We're looking at your census data compared to everybody else's to make sure that your share that you're reporting is correct. Your contribution is, the actuary comes up with what that has to be to pay your normal costs every year, plus a portion of that unfunded liability. Your share of their unfunded liability was $57.3 million at the end at 12/31/24, which was their last measurement date. So the system's about 70% funded. That liability will continue to come down as you continue to fund it. A lot of it, as we know from history, everything is great. Everything will go according to plan, except for the investments. A lot of it is based on investment earnings, so it really depends on the markets and how that will work. The law requires them to be fully funded. They're on a schedule to do that. If something happens where the investment earnings aren't what they're projecting to be, they could have to go out further on their funding schedule. That's what would happen. But really, it's managing your share of what you have to pay into Barnstable County Retirement every year. Again, just like OPEB, there's a lot of schedules. We have 10 years worth of trend information of what your liability is and what you've had to pay into Barnstable County Retirement. And some of the big other big liabilities are your debt. You have $11.5 million in long-term bonds. Most of that is with Mass Clean Water Trust. They're interest-free loans. We consider that sort of good debt, right? If you're borrowing money and you don't have to pay interest to pay it back, it's not a bad thing to do. It helps you to be able to manage your projects in a very prudent way with state funds that are available to you without paying interest on them. You also had 4.7 million of short-term bans at the end of fiscal year 25. General fund, your debt service is only 1% of your budget, very, very low compared to other governments. So we consider that not to be an issue at all. You're managing your assets and your capital activity without having a significant amount of debt on the books. Dredge has $1.1 million of long-term bonds and under $1 million in short-term bans at the end of the year. And to get to all of that, that's sort of your financial highlights, but you do have a lot of financial policies, and we really do focus on this because it helps you to drive what's happening behind the scenes, right? So budgeting, accounting and reporting, your reserves, your capital debt, I won't list all of them, but these are highlights of what you have in place for financial policies. Having those policies in place really helps to I'm going to say, put you in good fare with the rating agencies because they know that you're just not coming up with these on a year-to-year basis. You actually have financial policies in place that you are following to make sure that these results of operations continue to be positive. Having these policies gives you consistency. It helps if you have turnover in staff. You're not sort of flipping your policies over time. You have them in place. People are disciplined. They know what you have for debt, for stabilization, why you have these things in place. And it's really recognized as a best practice. There's really no question about that. And I mentioned earlier, because you do a comprehensive financial report, it's sort of the best of the best. You send this report into the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. You did get an award for the prior year, ACFR. This one has also been submitted to the GFOA for them to consider for that prestigious award. And you are the first county government in Massachusetts to issue an ACFR and get an award for it. And it really gives you, sort of put you at the highest end of financial reporting. And some key takeaways, the audit was clean, the financial opinions were clean. Everything we looked at for internal controls, there were no weaknesses that we identified, no significant deficiencies. All of our testing was clean. Really, the policies put you in a very high regard related to your finances, and you were recognized with an award for excellence in financial reporting from the GFOA. And I'll stop sharing that. And you have your reports. Are there any specific questions that I can answer about the audit, the practice of the audit, or the financial statements?
Yes, Deputy Speaker Frizel.
Madam Speaker. So I have a couple questions. I hear, what you said in your slides repeat that there were clean opinions on the federal awards and on the basic financial statements. What we've received is something which is, so it's a letter to the board, and it starts out with significant audit findings and runs through several things. Help me here. I didn't see the words "in our opinion" anywhere. So do you issue, some statement that says, "In our opinion, the financial statements are blank," so-called clean opinion language? I didn't see it in this letter. Is it somewhere else?
Yep. So there's three things that get issued. One is within your ACFR. The ACFR, again, is in Adobe, it's 134 pages, but I think it's about 125 pages. There is an independent auditor's report, page 11. And it says, "In our opinion," and there's actually that language is in there. You'll see the audit opinions, it's opinions. We have audited, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements referred to above present fairly. I won't read the whole thing to you, but that is our audit opinion. What I believe you are referring to is the letter to governance. So is this addressed to the Board of Regional Commissioners?
It is.
We have audited so that's not an
Yeah.
opinion. That's
Right.
required.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
I
an
understand.
opinion.
I've seen this
Okay.
before. That's why I was looking for that language in that letter. We don't have it, so I'd ask that someone send it to me, send it to the assembly. I'd like to
And if
see
they-
all of that.
Okay.
I'd like to see
And
that
same,
report.
I'm just
all
gonna
of it.
say, you want to see the single audit report too, because the single
got
audit
that.
report, that
We did
also
get
has
that.
opinions in it.
I know, and I've seen that, and you did a modified opinion language in the federal single audit report.
Yeah.
But can we get these slides today and also which give good references to the basic financial statements so that we can look at those? That would be helpful. Unless they're already available somewhere I'm not aware of. I addressed that to the administration.
You don't have the
Oh,
slides, because I don't think I sent the slides, but I can
No,
send
we
them
don't have the
over. I
slides,
can
and
send the slides over today, but you have the reports.
I don't know where that, all the pages you're referring to, the basic financial, where that is. I don't know where it is. Do we have it? I didn't recall getting it specifically, but it could be somewhere else on the website or something. I don't know. Is it someplace?
Hi, it's Carol Capola, the Finance Director. Certainly, we can provide those. They're also on the website, on the Finance Department page
Okay,
of the website, but we can certainly provide, we've provided them to the clerk, and we'll get those to you.
okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Mhm.
Just a couple of other things, if I may. In your report paper here, on the audit findings, you mentioned corrected and uncorrected misstatements. And it says that there are about, attached to this, about $1 million of entries. And in the view of management, that's not material. What's that all about? Can you give me a really quick explanation of that?
Yes,
Thank you.
I can. So one of the things we focus on every year is new standards, right? So everything you've done in the past is great, but GASB, the Governmental Accounting
Mhm.
Standards Board, changes their standards every year.
Right, right.
The new big standard that came out this year was on sick and vacation accruals. So at the end of the year, the county is required to report a liability for people's sick and vacation time that's accrued at the end of the year that potentially could be paid out in the future. In fiscal 25, there was a new GASB 101 that was implemented. Your options were one of two things. If it were material, we would have restated prior years, restated the past year, and you have a restatement of your financial statements. It was not the million, you're right, it's approximately $1 million in the change. You didn't do anything wrong. There was a new statement that came into play in 2025. Carol did a lot of work to comply with it. It requires the liability to go up because now the liability is based on not just what you're going to pay out, but what people are going to use for time in the future. So it requires all the liabilities to go up. It wasn't material to restate, so we ran it, what we call ran it through the financial statements. That entry is what we would have booked if we restated. We didn't. The liability is the liability, that wouldn't be different. But whether it hit expense or beginning balance, that's the nuance.
So it was immaterial and you didn't.
Immaterial to the financial
Right,
statements, yeah.
immaterial. Okay, and one last thing here. Am I correct that you're switched over to accrual basis accounting? Am I reading that correctly, that now the county's going on accrual basis? No?
Okay, let me, no, no,
Because I
yes,
saw
but
some
let me,
statement in there about how you were retained for a purpose of a financial statement accrual accounting.
so we, as part, I'm going to say a non-audit service, we help to put the ACFR together, right? So we take your ledgers, we take all the information provided by the county, and we help to put this report together. The report, this is not new since GASB 34, so, years and years. The county does budgetary reporting for the general fund. You have a budget to actual, that's in the financials. Fund-based reporting, that's your general fund and, all the major enterprise funds and so forth, major governmental funds. Not full accrual, but fund-based reporting, that's in your financial statements. And then there's a statement of net position and a statement of activities, that's full accrual. So we help to put that together. What that means is we take Carol's books and records with the fund-based reporting that she keeps track of all the time, and we take the county's OPEB liability, pension liability, fixed assets, long-term debt, compensated absences, and we help to build those full accrual financial statements. So it's not new that you report full accrual, you report both fund and full accrual, and we just help with that transition.
And is that what leads to a negative net position because you're accruing these significant liabilities, which is
Yes.
which is not reported elsewhere in the financials.
That's true.
Okay, thank you.
Dean Omen, go ahead.
Thank you. What an amazing report. I'm really grateful to have this come to us. One of the things I want to ask you about is in the past, I've been on the finance board for a long time, finance committee for a long time. In the past, they've given us suggestions on how to improve. Is that part of your presentation that we didn't see today? And I want to get specific on one thing. Use the word, as opposed to our stabilization fund, that you have a myriad of them. Could there be a suggestion that we consolidate them into smaller amounts, or do you have any other suggestions that you make us even a stronger county financially? Thank you.
There was no, so you're right. In some cases, we could issue what we call a management letter. If there were material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we would have to report them to you in writing. There were none. Are there things that we talked to Carol about throughout the audit? And I keep saying Carol, it's not just Carol, it's the whole finance team that we have discussions. We do. There was nothing that was put in writing related to that. I would not make a recommendation on the stabilization funds. There's a couple things, like you have policies and procedures. Certainly that's up to the county. All of these stabilization funds, the multiple stabilization funds, are relatively new in Massachusetts, right? For years, we could only have a stabilization or rainy day fund. The Mass General Law now allows for you to have multiple different stabilization funds for specific purposes. You can break them out however it best suits the county. It's not a bad idea to have specific funds set aside in specific buckets for specific purposes. You want to have a general, here's our rainy day fund, here's what we have to help us if we have a budgetary crisis or something happens, that we will take money out and we can put it in a process for putting it back into the stabilization fund. Having one for capital is never a bad idea. You have identified some other things. PFAS is sort of could be an unknown liability. We know that it's an issue in a lot of communities. If you're going to start setting money aside to potentially fund that, that's not a bad thing. But it really is specific to the county. If we thought that, oh, you didn't have enough and you didn't have enough, maybe we would say something about that, but it's really not our place to act as management. And I just hold back from wanting to do that.
Anyone else have questions they'd like to ask? Seeing if there are none, thank you very much for this very informative presentation. And we look forward to getting the slides. And thank you for coming today.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. And I'll get the slides over in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Yes, and Carol, thank you for leading us to the direction that we've become a lot more familiar with and are a lot happier with. So thank you for all the good work you and your team.
I couldn't agree more.
The Assembly will now convene. Next on the calendar are reports of officers and committees. The first report is from the Assembly Standing Committee on Finance. Dean Omen, as chair of the committee, can you please give the report on those meetings?
Certainly, Madam Speaker. I'll just read this. The Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates Finance Committee has reviewed proposed resolution number 10. Number 1, it urges the Barnstable County voters to carefully consider to create an elected charter commission, study commission, and cast votes.
Hold on one moment.
Do I have the wrong thing?
We think that might be.
That's not it. I got another one. I have a lot of them here. Yes. All right.
We got-
I have them right here.
do we have a-
Yeah, I got it. All right, pardon me. This is about the Standing Finance Committee that met remotely on July 15th, July 20th, and July 29th, 2026 to consider a proposed resolution establishing budget guidelines for the Board of Regional Commissioners in preparation for the fiscal year 2028 operating capital budgets. At the meeting on July 15th, the committee reviewed an initial framework of the proposed resolution, which addresses the county's long-range fiscal health and stability through 2031. The committee members expressed strong support for the proactive multi-year approach to long-range planning. Members debated whether the document should take form of an ordinance or a committee report, ultimately agreeing that a resolution is the most appropriate vehicle to express the collective advisory opinion of the Assembly. To ensure timely progress, the committee reached a consensus to proceed on an aggressive timeline, targeting a final committee vote in August now, so that the resolution can be debated and voted on by the full Assembly at its first meeting in September. At the meeting on July 29th, the committee reviewed an updated draft incorporated edits. The County Administrator, Michael Dutton, attended the meeting and expressed willingness to work with the commissioners and the Assembly on the resolution to finalize and vote on this resolution. The committee rescheduled its next meeting for August 10th, 2026. That's one. That's both. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. The next report is from the Assembly Standing Committee on Governmental Affairs and Rules. Deputy Speaker Frizzell is chair of that committee. Can you please give the report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The Standing Committee on Government Affairs and Rules met remotely on July 29, 2026 to consider proposed resolution 2026-09 supporting the nonprofit Orleans Historical Society, Inc. in its construction of the Ocean Rescue Museum of Cape Cod to permanently preserve the historic CG 36-500 motor lifeboat. And proposed resolution 2026-05, amending the Assembly of Delegates Manual of Governance and Procedures, Section 14, on procedure for consideration of proposed ordinances, resolutions, and other items of business. The committee unanimously recommended by a vote of 5-0 that the full Assembly adopt proposed resolution 2026-09. Howard Gostin, a member of the Board of Directors for the Centers for Culture and History in Orleans, attended the meeting. Delegate Lillian Green, as a sponsor, explained how it would help raise funds, secure donations, leverage media, and support grant applications for the museum to preserve the historic boat that performed the greatest small boat rescue in Coast Guard history by saving 32 crew members of the SS Pendleton in 1952. The committee reviewed the revisions to proposed resolution 2026-05 made by its sponsor, Delegate James Killian, to address prior committee concerns. Delegate Killian explained that the revised resolution would give committees more responsibility for thorough reviews and encourage sponsors to research and vet proposals before submission. Committee members shared concerns about a small committee subverting the Assembly's agenda by blocking proposals and noted that reports should reach the full Assembly, even if the committee finds a proposal unworkable. To allow unfavorable reports to reach the floor, the committee voted unanimously by a vote of 5-0 to amend it to clarify that a committee must affirmatively approve the final report itself by a majority vote, rather than requiring a majority to recommend approval of the specific legislative item. The committee recommended the full Assembly adopt the resolution as revised with this change. In the report.
So there's just one resolution. No, there's two, right? Yeah.
If I might, Madam Speaker, I think first, and there may be some confusion because these were taken in a different order at the committee than was on the committee agenda, but we do think first we've got 2026-05, so we just did a motion for
Okay,
that
so-
thing first.
Deputy Speaker, we need a motion for 2026-05.
Okay, let me ask so that we have no confusion about this. that was amended. So do you want a motion on 05 before amendment or as amended recommended by the committee? I'm a little confused.
It's fine that you're confused. We were confused this morning and thought about it and researched it. The resolution was submitted to the assembly in a different format. And so I think what we need is something to put it on the floor and then to amend it to the version that the Assembly Government Affairs Committee recommended out. So you have a resolution that's been submitted to the assembly, kind of at that point belongs to the full assembly. So the committee itself can't make that amendment, the assembly has to.
I understand.
Yep.
But
So
in terms of debate and discussion, rather than getting a debate and discussion on the original and then on the amendment, should we have the debate and discussion just on the amended resolution and not take a vote on the original one? Take a vote on the amendment and then a vote on the resolution as amended.
I appreciate you doing this up front. My recommendation as parliamentarian would be, and the speaker could make that ruling as chair, that's her responsibility, but would be to put a motion on the floor for the resolution as submitted, and then right afterwards, make a motion to amend for the language. You're gonna need 2 votes is the point.
I understand the 2 votes. I want to make sure we take it in an efficient manner as possible, in the least confusing manner as possible. So following that, I will make a motion on the floor for the original motion, and I will then make a motion to amend, and then we can discuss motion as amended and then take 2 votes after we do that. Okay, thank you. I move original motion, motion to approve resolution 2026-05 as originally submitted. I now move to. I now move.
Hold on, no. Oh, go ahead.
Is,
Right here.
here, okay. There is a motion with a second to adopt proposed resolution 2026-05. Is there any discussion on that motion? And if Deputy Speaker Frizzell would like to speak first as the mover, that's fine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now move that we amend Resolution 2026-05 by substituting language from the original motion to the language adopted as a recommendation by the Government Affairs Committee. And that folks is in line 15. If you
We need a second.
Second. Thank you. If you look at line 15, we had made just a slight change in line 15 by deleting 3 words. The committee submits its final report, which has been affirmatively approved by the majority of the voting members. It was to clarify that all that needs to be affirmatively approved to release from committee is a report, not that the committee has to vote affirmatively to approve the subject of that particular item, the ordinance or the resolution. So in other words, there could be a report that says we are unfavorably, we do not recommend the assembly adopt this particular item of legislation. However, we approve the report that says we don't want to do it. So it doesn't get stalled in committee until there is a majority of the committee that is in favor of the specific legislation. Obviously, the committee will work to try to make it a good piece of legislation, but it could get to a point where it just isn't possible to reach that consensus, and we didn't want to keep it in the committee. Instead, it should come to the full assembly for a further discussion and a further vote rather than staying in the committee. So that was the reason for an amendment by taking out the words that made it that the resolution originally said it had to be a majority vote in favor of the item of legislation before it could be released from the committee. And that is something which majority said, no, let's just say a report has to be received, has to be voted by a majority. That's the reason for the amendment. Hopefully that's clear enough. If not, we certainly can talk about it more.
Delegate Gessen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question first for either the sponsor or the deputy speaker, and then I had a quick comment after that, if that's all right, Madam Speaker. Through you.
I'm sorry, Dan. It didn't all, your message didn't all come through. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Madam Speaker, if it's okay with you, I have a quick question followed by a comment on the proposal. That's okay.
Delegate Gessen, we are not hearing anything at all from your end now.
Gotcha. I'll call back into the meeting real quick. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody on the floor? No? Okay. I would like to wait a minute or two to see if he can get back in.
Should we go to resolution 9 and adopt that while we're waiting?
That'll only add confusion, I think.
Okay.
Oh, I think he's coming in now. Hold on. Delegate Gessen? Can you hear me?
Looks like he's muted. He's muted.
You're muted. Delegate Gessen, you're muted.
It looks like he doesn't have permission to unmute.
No, he does have permission, Delegate Green. It's *6. It is what it is. I can't unmute him myself, so.
Uh, so we, oh, I think you're unmuted now. Try saying something.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay,
can y'all hear
now
me
we
all
can
right?
hear you.
Fantastic. I could hear everyone, so I was having a good time. But, Madam Speaker, I had a question for the Deputy Speaker, followed by a comment on the proposal. And sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yes,
When it
that's
comes,
fine.
When it comes to the report, if the committee decides to take no action on a proposal, neither an affirmative vote, neither a negative vote, no recommendation, can it still get included in a report like the committee took no action? And is that sufficient to bring the proposal to the full body, or does it need a positive or negative vote?
I'll answer that. The answer is that's a report. If the majority says that, recommend no action, that's the report of the committee. So long as there is a report that gets the support of the majority of the committee, it will be discharged by the committee. And also, as part of this resolution, it's clear that even if the committee doesn't release a piece of legislation, any member of the assembly can move at the assembly to take it out and have it discharged from the committee. So it's not as if the committee has the final and only say as to whether an item of legislation leaves the committee's jurisdiction. Always at the end of the day, this assembly, by a vote, either majority or 2/3, depending on how you make a motion to remove it from committee, that item can come out of committee even if there is no report that has been made by the committee.
And sorry, follow up on that. Could you explain the two scenarios, the 2/3 or the majority vote? Under what circumstances does it require a 2/3 vote?
It requires if 2/3 if some member of the assembly makes a motion to discharge without having previously given notice to the committee of the intention to discharge. If that's a 2/3 vote. If, on the other hand, a member moves and says, we'd like to put on the calendar for the next meeting that we discharge from the committee, that would only take a majority. If that, do I have that right, Mr. Clerk, or you want to clarify?
There's one more scenario, which I think is important to note, which is if a committee were to come back and say, we want to keep working, we are not done yet. That is in effect a partial report. So think of the two reports we had tonight. In that scenario, anybody in the assembly, while right after that report, could make a motion to discharge it from the committee, and it only requires a majority vote.
Okay, I guess I have I have a concern with this proposal, and I don't find myself supportive of it. And largely, it focuses on the fact that you don't need to fix what ain't broke. And largely, our committee process, hasn't been, to my understanding, even haven't been in leadership, too contentious around who serves on what committee, because there's always an understanding that we're volunteers on these bodies. This isn't a gatekeeping institution. And these proposals will get aired out in front of a smaller group of people. And regardless of who that subset of delegate is, we trust them to air it out. And in the end, all the delegates are going to get a chance to speak on it, because even as we saw with Delegate Freisel's discussion introducing this ordinance or a resolution onto the floor, the committee doesn't even have the ability to amend a proposal, much less refrain from bringing one to the floor as it stands currently. And to my mind, this proposal adds an extra unnecessary step at the most graceful. The step's unnecessary because we haven't run into a problem where unnecessarily individuals have felt that we are too hastily yanking things out of committee, or things are getting too much light of day in this institution. But also at its worst, I believe, if we don't give folks the benefit of the doubt, and we never know who's going to be sitting in these seats in the future, or what contentious issues we're going to see, this creates a gatekeeping mechanism, whether it's a chair deciding not to convene a committee meeting, so as for an issue not to be considered, or 3 members deciding not to vote on a report that contains discussion of that ordinance, or just off the top of my head, 3 members refusing to attend a subcommittee meeting to refrain from that meeting having quorum. All these instances in that case would then create a scenario where the proposal is at the very least delayed. And if it does require a 2/3 vote to get it out of the committee, it's really at the behest of maybe the Barnstable delegate and the Falmouth delegate and one more delegate to make that decision. To my mind, as well-intentioned as it is, I think it's solving a problem that doesn't exist, and it's raising the risk of, in a future scenario, if we do have contentious issues on the floor of the assembly, gatekeeping, less transparency, and really the same issues that we see at the state legislative level that we filed a resolution complaining about, which is the committee process being abused so that individuals can kill proposals without accountability to the voters. So I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a solution search for a problem, and it's ripe for abuse. So I'm going to vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Gessen. Delegate, just before you, Delegate O'Malley, go ahead, please.
I recognize Delegate Gessen's sense of this being a solution in search of a problem. On the other hand, I see it as an affirmation of the effort in this body to lean more heavily on its committees to do the background, to do the investigation, to reach out, have conversations, have dialogues with appropriate people. And I think the essence of what our deliberations on this were intended to prevent the committee from becoming a stopper. That and you're perfectly right that it's conceivable in a committee that 2 people, in the absence of a full body, or 3 people could stop something. And I think the amendments that were made were designed to prevent the committee from becoming a stopper, a decision maker. It's not a decision maker. It's an information gathering, a deliberative process. And I think out of that, the idea that every substantive ordinance is going to be subjected to a committee investigation and hearings in advance is an opportunity to tease out additional background material and additional facts, perspectives. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's worth it. Pretty clearly, it's one of these situations where, since this is a resolution, we could always decide a year down the line, this doesn't work and it's causing a blockage. But I think it reinforces the role of the committees, and I'm for it.
Thank you, Delegate O'Malley. Delegate
Killian.
Delegate Killian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the comments, Delegate O'Malley. And this process that we went through to get this resolution here was essentially the process that this resolution is trying to put in place, in that the resolution that was submitted to the committee was not viewed upon favorably. And in the old days, it would have just probably come to the assembly with an unfavorable recommendation. Instead, we discussed it, and I took what the committee said to heart, and we made the changes that everyone agreed were necessary, so that what came out of there was a resolution that, in this case, received a unanimous vote, but it could have received a 3-2 vote. But the point is, we did the work necessary to produce something that the committee agreed with. And that's the whole point of this resolution, is that we're not passing things out of committee with an unfavorable recommendation. We're doing our best to create something that is favorable, even if it's a 3-2 vote, whatever it is. But we put in the time and the effort to that the assembly knows when something gets here, it's been vetted well, and that, maybe the work isn't complete, but the work has been done to improve whatever is coming before us.
Thank you, Delegate Killian. Deputy Speaker Frizzell.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a couple of comments in response to Delegate Gessen. First comment is, let's look at the positives, not necessarily the negatives and the nefarious way in which things can be used. In fact, some of the things he said I'd never crossed my mind, frankly, and how this process works and how committees should work. So I think I prefer to work on a good faith basis that we're all going to work on this in the committees for the better, not to be conspiratorial or trying to stymie the will of the assembly. And in that regard, I don't want it to be left with the thought that it takes 2/3 for this to get anything to get before this assembly. This assembly, by majority vote, can take care of everything, including anything that's in a committee. A majority vote of this assembly will move something out of committee and onto the floor of this body. So we act by majority vote of this assembly. That's the bottom line. And that's where the power at the end of the day will always rest. Thank you.
Delegate Gessen, you still have your hand up. Did you want to speak again?
Yes, when it's my turn, absolutely, Madam Speaker. Oh,
Okay.
I would just also add another concern, even if it's not used for nefarious purposes. One of the biggest complaints, if you read the Boston Globe, or if you like a lot of delegates here, have worked with the legislative branch in Massachusetts, is the fact that even if it's not over the will of the legislative body, a tremendous amount of proposals get sent to study on Beacon Hill in Boston, essentially to get further, as on its face, to do exactly what Delegate Killian is describing, for these proposals to get further studied, for the sponsors to improve them, for them to get continuously refined. But in reality, it ends up being a method by which the vast majority of proposals die on Beacon Hill, again, without any of the voting members, any of the senators and representatives ever actually having to take a difficult vote that would be unpopular, because it would be voting down a proposal that would be largely popular. Again, I think it's clearly not been to the benefit of our democratic system at the state level, and I would hate for that kind of opportunity to exist at the assembly level, because I think it corrupts the incentive structure, even for well-meaning people. Again, at no point do I think this is created or attribute this to anyone wanting to do anything but improve the functioning of the assembly. I just think it creates opportunity to serve, to modify the incentive structure in this body in a way that doesn't benefit the voters of Cape Cod. And that's why I hesitate to support it, but I appreciate all the work that folks put into it.
Thank you. Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I understand where Dan's coming from because the state legislature and the federal legislature right now is a nightmare. But we're not. And I think that we can worry that, county government goes to hell like the rest of the world. But I think that maybe we can use this as a roadmap of how we're not going to go to hell. We have procedures in place. And so far, we've all treated each other with respect. And I know we're going to have new members in the next term, but I just don't want to hope for the worst. So I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Harder. Is there anyone else who has something to say?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find myself in agreement with Delegate Gessen that this creates a requirement that all ordinances be referred to committee. And I find that we are a small collegial group and that we can act efficiently in the committee as a whole, and that not everything requires study by committee. And therefore, I will oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Gallagher. Anyone else? Okay, so which one are we voting on
The
first?
amendment. The amendment.
Which is,
The
okay.
amendment for comes first. Vote on the
Okay.
amendment, then as amended.
Okay, we are voting on the amendment first.
Right here.
Okay, the question is proposed resolution 2026-05. Oh, the question is on amending proposed resolution 2026-05 by substituting the language recommended by the Government Affairs and Rules Committee for the resolution as submitted. A yes vote is one of in favor of amending the proposed resolution. A no vote is one in favor of leaving the proposed resolution unchanged. Clerk Fletcher, can you do the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Freisel.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Delegate Gessen. Delegate Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate King, Delegate McKelvey,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen.
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, been a while since we did a roll call this meeting, but I still think it's 1497.12% of the county's population.
The motion to amend passes. There is already a motion with a second on the main question, whether to adopt proposed resolution 2026-05 as amended. Okay, is there anyone who wants to speak further to that side? No, okay. The question is on adopting, I think it's important to repeat these since they're been a little bit convoluted. The question is on adopting proposed resolution 2026-05, amending the Assembly of Delegates Manual of Governments and Procedures, Section 14, on procedure for consideration of proposed ordinances, resolutions, and other items of business. See as amended. Clerk Fletcher, can you do the roll?
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Freisel.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher,
No.
Delegate Gessen,
No.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate King, Delegate McKelvey,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen.
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, that's 12 delegates representing 80.41% of the county's population.
Okay, the motion passes. I now recognize Delegate Fuller to address the second recommendation from the Assembly Standing Committee on Government Affairs and Rules meeting report for July 29th, 2026.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to adopt the proposed resolution 2026-09, supporting the nonprofit Orleans Historical Society, Inc., and its construction of the Ocean Rescue Museum of Cape Cod to permanently preserve the historic CG 36500 motor lifeboat.
Second.
Adopt proposed resolution 2026-09. As the mover, I'd like to recognize Delegate Fuller first if he would like to speak. Delegate Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You have the full text which outlines the objective of the Orleans Historical Society to preserve the boat. There is also a brief history of the boat and the proposed rescue of the CG 36500 from complete destruction. I would also say that the boat attended the presentation of the Finest Hour movie at its premiere in Chatham. It was towed up the street and it was outside when people came out of the movie. I would urge you to vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Delegate Green.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also am in support of this resolution and letter. In fact, I'd like to thank those who are here that were part of the Assembly at the time when the Assembly unanimously approved a similar resolution and letter in support of the Cape Cod Modern House Trust restoration of the Marcel Brewer Summer House. The work has been completed and the house is stunning and very interesting. The founding director, Peter McMahon, thanks the Assembly very much for standing up, and with the resolution and letter, he said that it was very helpful. He leveraged it with grant proposals in news articles, including an article in the New York Times that did talk about the Assembly, and also with donors. From my perspective, this is a win-win for the nonprofit and also for the Assembly. Yeah, I urge my fellow delegates to vote in favor of this resolution and letter, and also to be open to other projects of this nature in your communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Green. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? Sorry, yes, go ahead, Delegate.
I just want to say that time takes a toll on us all, and to preserve history, that's American history, as well as our local Cape Cod history, is an important thing to stand up for. So I'm voting for this.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Clerk Fletcher, can we?
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Frizzell.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
Delegate Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate King, Delegate McKelvey,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Deed Obid,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, that's 14 delegates representing 97.12% of the county's population.
The motion passes. Next is the order of the day. There are none for this particular meeting. Next is the calendar of new business. There is none also. Well, just a moment.
I just want to point out that there is a resolution that is being introduced today about the charter study ballot question. And so, yeah.
Are we going to do that?
Oh, no, it's just being introduced. So that's under new business. So, yep.
We'll do business.
Get harder.
Delegate Harder?
So under our new resolution, who is resolution 10 going to?
Oh, under your new resolution, kind of like what's current practice, the speaker would determine where it goes. So that's,
All right, so we
We
don't
got-
know yet.
I haven't read that. Okay. Are there any announcements? I have one or two. Okay. As you know, the legislator has passed I don't know what they call it, the final.
Protect Act.
What's that?
Protect Act.
Yeah, and so what I would request is if those who proposed it, and I think that it would be helpful if you would look at what is still outstanding in the ordinance that you've put forth against what the state legislator has done, and see if you feel that you wish to go forward with that particular that particular proposed ordinance. Not that it might not have value, just that there may be more things that have been addressed that would not require it, or could potentially require a modification. Delegate O'Malley.
It's my understanding, unless things have changed, that the Protect Act refers explicitly to state property and state buildings under their control. And whereas what we're talking about is county, and that the State Protect Act does not in any way reference the county. That's my understanding. Am I correct?
I don't know. It just came out and I have not had a chance to, I don't really know. So I think we'll have to ask the lawyers to take a quick look at it, because I don't want to say yes and then say, no, of course it's the state, and the state does cover this county. So we'll get you an answer on that. Okay. Thank you. I also, okay, yes, Dan?
Yes, Massey, having read the Protect Act cover to cover, I don't think there's anything unexpected in there. And really, at least, I don't want to speak for all the co-sponsors, but Delegate O'Malley raised the point. There's nothing that we didn't expect there, and the county property specifically is still completely unaddressed in the Protect Act. So to that end, I as a co-sponsor, would still want to move forward with it. Do you know what committee is going to be addressing and discussing this?
Government Affairs handled it the first time.
The Government Affairs handled it first. Okay.
time, yeah.
Should it go back there?
And if it's up to you, Madam Speaker, if you want to send it back there.
Okay.
Or-
Okay, Government Affairs will look at it one last time. They looked at it the first time. And I think it's important that we just do due diligence, and then once we get that information, I think it's ready to be put back on the assembly floor and have a vote on it, because we also had.
If I may, Madam Speaker.
I beg your pardon?
If I may, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I know government affairs looked a lot different when it was last considering this proposal, and it had the chairs of various committees. I know we've had a lengthy discussion about the kind of role government affairs would take on when we change the face of government affairs, including the fact that it wouldn't necessarily spearhead substantive policy. This seems incredibly substantive policy. And I won't make a motion on it because I will defer to leadership decisions, but as a co-sponsor, a delegate, I would encourage the speaker to
Dan?
possibly also refer to
Delegate.
Health and Human Services instead.
Delegate Gesson, hold on. This isn't in an announcement section, so we can't, if you would like us to do this, we can put it on the next agenda and well, we can, take on whatever you'd like to take on at that point. But at this point, we're just doing an announcement, and to do any motion or any kind of anything else would be inconsistent with the way in which the Robert's Rules outlines it. Is that
Can I?
okay? Clerk Fletcher would like to add something.
I had an easy announcement, which is we already have a finance committee meeting on Monday. And given the state of some of our other business, if we can get things together, there may be meetings on Wednesday. So please do what you always do and look out for any communications from the assistant clerk and I about what next week might bring.
Does that Matt satisfy you, Delegate Gessen?
I don't think anything ever will, but I think
Well, that's how we're going to proceed, and I appreciate the questions, and we'll definitely get to them in a different format. Thank you.
thank you, Madam Speaker.
I did also speak to Julian Sear about the other housing initiative that has been up at the House, and he has indicated that it is definitely in the pile, that it will ultimately get its own hearing, but he can't possibly begin to tell me when that might be, but it wouldn't be sooner than
The transfer fee?
the transfer fee. So that's still kind of on a hold. Is there anything else? Nope. Okay. That's all. Anybody else have something they'd like to announce?
I don't know if that's hands new or old.
That's old.
That's old.
Okay. The Assembly has considered all the items on the calendar. Is there any further business? Since there's no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the good work.
Thank you. And thank you all to all the delegates.
This reference is dangling.